Matters show. I'm Shibani Philip, and I lead the APAC business for Question Pro. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out to join us this morning. As always, the goal of the show is to bring in experts in the market research and the CX industry to share really their knowledge, their experience, so we collectively as an industry can learn and implement these best practices within our organization. Right? So today is a very special show because we've got Abu Samuel joining us, an absolute veteran in the market research industry. He's worked with multiple research agencies across both India and Middle East across his tenure, helping clients run their MR programs. Right? He now works as an independent consultant with clients and agencies, helping them improve their programs and really implement those best practices when they're running their research projects. Abu, thank you so much for taking the time. How's it going?
Great. Thank you, Shibani. That was a wonderful introduction.
Based in Bangalore now. What are the weekend plans?
Yeah, nothing much. Just relax. There's nothing more than a lazy Sunday.
And that
So,
is true. That is
yeah,
true. It is. I
right.
don't think we have very much planned either. It is literally, like I said, going to be a lazy weekend, and there's nothing better than that.
Exactly.
um,
Well,
so yeah. Sorry. So you were saying?
no, great, nice to come on your show and, love to see how the conversation goes and how it flows.
Absolutely. So we've got a few people who've joined in. So maybe we can kick this off.
Sure,
The
sure,
main
sure, sure.
goal of this show is basically now, because I was been working with multiple of these agencies, working with execs who are part of the agencies as well as part of the client side. You really get a feel of what is happening in the industry, the knowledge levels across all of these executives who are running these programs. So one is to walk us through what that really looks like, what that agency looks like, both if in India and Middle East, whichever region that you'd want to cover. How do you improve the knowledge, right? The importance of training, the importance of improving the knowledge amongst these execs who are actually running the programs, and at the end of the day they're the ones who are sharing the insights that the organization leverages in order to put in investments, to look at improvements, to just the direction in which the organization needs to go. So the real importance of that, the consequences of not having those trainings in place, and what should really the organizations be focusing on when they hire new talent into the organization. What are the aspects that they should be looking at in order to train those executives, right? So with that, I'll let you kick it off. Can you give us, just an update? You've been working with so many of these clients. What is the industry like now compared to how it was, 20, 30 years ago, or, whenever you started?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, but it has been well over 20 years so,
Yeah.
since I started my career. But obviously, yes, the market, the industry has changed considerably, especially in the last 5 years, with so many new industries coming in and changing the way business was done earlier. And that is expected in any industry. I mean, not just in the market research industry, in any industry. The technology that we had in those days and what we have today, the ease and access to analyze data, has changed considerably. But along with all of that, there is some basics which don't change, which I think is really what, to a large extent, that's the basics of market research. In the end, what are we doing? We're just, we're getting information from the market,
Yeah.
analyzing it to address a specific issue that the client has in mind, or some objective, some business decision that needs to be made. Now that remains the same, irrespective of whether you started in the 90s or it's in today's, or whatever. Now, given that basics, I wanted to talk today about really to what extent that has held
Yeah.
true in the sense, how agencies are managing it and training their staff, the executives on those basics. both on the agency side and the client side, and what are the drawbacks or what are the benefits that happens from it. Now, to a large extent, just to give you an example, let's just take, for instance, customer satisfaction and loyalty. You know, Practically, it's universal, as in most industries, whether you're consumer or whether you're in, industrial, whether you're a large company or a small company, it's something that's needed everywhere. And to a large extent, agencies have catered to that need, and they have come up with their own models, very robust models, well thought through, good models. The analysis is very strong. And the outputs, the data that you get, the presentation, the insights that you get are very useful for clients. Now, that is great. So everyone benefits from it. So the clients benefit from this model that is there. Agencies also benefit because you don't have to relearn and improve each time. It is a well thought through. It's done over so many industries and so many different kind of projects. That it's a robust model. And so, for instance, there could be a typical banking. Let's just to give you an example, a banking template, and you go from one bank to another. 95% of the question is the same. You just change a few attributes here and there, and you're on, and it's good. So industry benefits. So that, and those kinds of models have picked up in the market over time. In the earlier days, there weren't so many standardized models. Now, for various aspects, there are a lot of standardized models, and which is a good thing. But at the same time, we need to remember that there are some drawbacks and limitations to this. I mean, not so much from the client side, or basically from the industry perspective. Overall industry development. So what happens is the juniors who are recruited. I'm talking really the 1 to 3 year or the freshers who are who come into the market research industry, are trained very well on these models. Okay, so they know how to run it brilliantly. They know what the how they're excellent at it. They know exactly how to do it, and if there are some aberrations in something, they've been trained how to look at that and explain that and things like that. But the problem is they're given exposure only to that. And to a large extent, 90% of their projects would be I'm just again going back to a CSAT, it could be anything else. Maybe they'll do it for a banking industry, they'll do it for some other financial sector, they'll do it for airlines, they'll do it for, but it'll all remain within this domain of this thing. The problem with that is they miss out on a lot of the basic thinking that is needed in market research. They're not trained, and it's unfair to them. It's unfair to them. It's unfair to the industry. It's unfair to clients. So they go to a client and they have this, let's say, a banking thing, and they do the presentation, and then that person says, "Oh, that's great, but we are looking now at expanding to some other market. Right? It's not banking. Let's say it's any industry. Well, let's say a chain of restaurants. They've done this, and then they say, now we are looking at maybe setting up a new one in Chennai or Hyderabad. We are already there in 3 other big cities. We want to get into Chennai. So what would you suggest? How do we go about it? How do we decide?
Blank.
Just blank, because they've not been exposed to understand. I mean, and it's a very basic process. It's a very basic rationalized process of how do you look at it. For this thing. So that part of it is where I feel there needs to be far more emphasis in terms of how you train and expose the freshers, and then they carry it through. It's not that every time they will have to go through this thing, but then once you've learned that basic, or once you're exposed to it, and once it's in the back of your mind, it becomes much easier later on, because as you go senior into the industry, you're not going to be just a CSAT expert.
Correct.
You're going to be, in the end, we are in market research consultancy. You're not just market research, as in we're not just data and analysis. It's not just that. We are advisors to a large extent for many business issues, but then of course from the perspective of market research. I mean, we can't be technical advisors, we can't be financial advisors, but we're advisors as far as using market research to address certain issues are concerned. So that is the only aspect which I thought was a limitation.
But in terms of if you look at it from the agency perspective, they have to, there is also a fine line, right? They have to make sure every project is robust, you're asking all the right questions, you're asking it the right way, especially when you're doing like an omnibus brand tracking study, right? This multiple clients are going to be getting the data and the insights from it. So they have to be looking at that side of it also, but getting the freshers and the people who are joining to be involved in these ad hoc studies. So every agency has ad hoc studies that come to them, that they're running. Is that the way that, making sure that the team that's working on the brand tracking studies are also working on, these one-off ad hoc
Ad hoc.
studies, because um, yeah. So is that the approach, or is
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
putting a structured training in place?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, both. We'll come to the training part later. But yes, this is exactly what I was saying. Don't let them just do, tracking or working on a model. You
Yeah.
have to expose the juniors to ad hoc studies and
Yeah.
involve them from the beginning. Let them, come along for meetings where the marketing manager or whoever it is, or the research agency, I mean, research manager, whoever it is, talks about a business issue, and they listen to it, and then they see how their seniors kind of translate that into finally a research proposal, as in, so what is the information, how do we best go about it, and things like that. Quite often, and I've seen this, unfortunately, uh, the agency, because they are so well set in, let's say, the CSAT thing. Okay, now let's take that example of the restaurants, right? And he said, no, I want to do Chennai or Hyderabad or wherever. So you could go back and say, no, no, let's do a CSAT study in Chennai and Hyderabad. See whether there's a gap, where people are unhappy, and this thing. No, very logical. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense. But there is so much more to it. You got
Yeah.
to look at the profile of the population, the growth, the industry, the people coming in, their dining habits. Are they, outgo? Are there people who I like to go out and eat? So many other things come into this thing. Now they don't think about that. This is like dragging the problem to suit your model. It could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be I want to launch new flavors of. I've got ice creams. I want to launch two new flavors because my competitor
Yeah.
is doing it. Should I do it or not? And if so, which one? Let's do a CSAT study. Let's go and see whether the competitors are happy or not, and then see whether this thing. And then they'll also tell you. It'll give you insights, certainly.
Yeah.
But is
Yeah.
that the way to answer that particular objective? And
Yeah.
these are the issues that happen, and because and you can't blame that executive simply because
Yeah.
they've been exposed and they're
Because
most
they've been.
comfortable with it and they think it's extremely powerful, which is very true.
Yeah.
So broad which is why I'm saying, yes, let them be exposed to these models, of course, and well trained on that, but give them at least 25 to 30%, if not more, of the exposure to absolutely ad hoc studies. And, even if it is a industrial B2B kind of a study, fine. It doesn't have to be just consumer research, it could be anything.
Yeah.
But that exposure helps them in their thinking process. And that helps later on as they become more and more senior within the organizations. They are better consultants to their clients because
Yeah.
once you past a certain level, you're not hands on. Very
Correct.
rarely are you hands on. It's usually hands on the project. It's 1 to 3 years, the maximum thing. So they build those skills at that stage, but they also need to develop their thinking process during that. They cannot be blindly, just following a particular this thing and
Yeah.
doing it, and they do
And
that very well.
yeah, yeah. No, it's and exactly like I said, we are the consultants, right? It's not always that we can get the client side doesn't have the exposure. Also, we are the ones with the expertise to translate. Okay, this is their business problem into okay, these are the objectives of the research that we are going to run, which is definitely a skill that has to be developed, a skill that you improve on over time. Yeah.
True. And it only comes with experience and the more you're exposed to. So give the juniors the exposure.
Yeah.
Make it a point that they are exposed. Part of their, the work they do, they'll be evaluated on the ad hoc projects they've worked on.
Yeah.
So make that, they can't be. I mean, of course, again, when you look at a research agency, yes, there are business, goals, and there are, business targets to be met, and there is the churn, employees getting skilled people leave, all those things are there. That's in any business. But as a structure within the organization, if there is emphasis that the research expertise built within our organization. So anyone, our people are known to be consultants. I mean, they are consultants as good as any other big consultancies, but in this specific field of market research and how to apply market research for irrespective of what your business issue is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that is one aspect of it. The other thing is the nitty gritties. There also there isn't training. I mean, there isn't adequate training. Questionnaire design,
Sample sizing
AI,
it just doesn't get covered.
sample sizing, exactly,
Yeah.
sample sizing. True, true. And quite often it's just put into the most convenient large round number, or it goes into quota sampling and things like that.
Yes.
That's fine. But then what about weighting? Are they
Yeah.
taught about what? So they need to know about these aspects. Now, unless there is someone who's telling them or who's told them initially that these are possible things that can be done, or questionnaire, this is certain definite no's, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't do it. There is nothing ideal. I agree. There's nothing that's perfect. On anything, you can always improve. That I agree. But that does not mean you should leave the very obvious mistakes, getting repeated, and having that, which also puts a burden on the seniors because they can't totally let it go because they need to recheck. They can't totally rely on something that's come up, and that is where inefficiencies come for this thing. Then the approach. There again, I mean, in the design. Now, which is the best way to do it? I mean, is it even as a quant survey, is it a face-to-face or is it an online thing? What is the trade-off? Is it which is the best, most appropriate thing for this kind of a study? Is it qual? Is it quant? Is it both? Which follows what? How should it follow? What is the kind of analysis you want to do, even if it's a quant thing? What is the kind of analysis you want to do? I mean, for answering the objective. And for that analysis, how should your questionnaire be structured?
Yeah.
How do you want to get your data so that your analysis approaches that you are going to use are going to give you the kind of at least inputs to be able to answer that end objective?
Yeah.
So many of these things, it actually happens, and there are mistakes made, and you can't help it. But what you can do is, as an agency, you can minimize it, and to
Yep.
a large extent, even on the client side, clients are even less exposed because they are getting exposed to only. I'm talking about the MR department. I don't know if there are, in your audience, if there are people from that side. But anyway, my point is they are even less exposed to research. At least if you're on the agency side, you're exposed to a couple of different projects, and here they're exposed only to what that particular this thing does. And quite often they say, no, this is how it was done. So let's continue with it. Or if I do it in a more efficient way, oh, there are budgets. I need to fight for my budgets. It will get squeezed next. A lot of silly, things happen which are practical. That happens. Uh, so I think the onus is really on the agency rather than
Yep.
the to expect it to be driven from the client side.
Yeah.
So and there are ways to do it.
Yep. On a side note, I have entered the industry because of Abu Samuel, right? No, not everyone is as lucky as I am to have a mentor. Got me my first internship with a market research agency. Worked with a B2B company again because of Abu Samuel in Chennai called Madras Consultancy Group. And after that, I wanted to move client side, right? And Abu was like, no, not yet. You don't know. You haven't learned enough. And then I did my postgrad in marketing. So no step in my career has gone forward without getting, the go ahead and the green light from Abu. So I am lucky that way. But for everyone who's joined, you can leverage his knowledge as well, right? All of the details. If you have any questions, any specific questions that you'd like to get his take on, get his just his go ahead or his green light for you, just put it in the comment section. We can answer it on the call. Otherwise, post the call, we can get in touch with you and set up those discussions to see how to take it forward. So all of y'all can be as lucky as I have been. But
Most certainly would be
Appa, I
very
know.
happy, delighted. Yeah.
Sorry.
Would be very happy to take on those questions, and any way I can help.
I had one question. Now, I know a lot of your career was spent in agencies and working with clients in India, and then a lot of years in the Middle East, right? Is there a difference that you see in the approach, or is it mostly the same?
No, this is a typical difference between India and the Middle East. So the Middle East, they don't, they don't. No company, irrespective of which industry you are, is interested in training the people because it's a expat population. So they get trained people. They don't want, they don't. They're not going to spend time training. Very few, very very few. So most of the training the freshers would get would be in India, because this is where most companies look at it as they are not like they're a complete different, two different, completely different markets.
Okay.
But the huge difference when you practice market research is the complexities of India, and the Middle East has its own complex in terms of the population, the profiling, what you need to be careful about, how you're allowed to do your data collection. There are a lot of differences between India and the Middle, which is expected
Got it.
because they are two different regions totally.
Mm, mm,
But
mm,
that you
mm.
learn as you go there. You learn, and you get used to it, and things like that. Those limitations are there, but otherwise, in the basic approach,
Mm.
in terms of how you do market research, what models you can apply, and things like that remains largely the same,
All on par with each. Okay. Okay.
more or
Got it.
less. And then, of course, the costing is
So
different, so that's a different thing. But others,
yeah, that yeah, fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What is how do you so what do they do, right? So for all I will just let you know the audience that we typically get for this show are people who are those freshers who've joined, who are handling these research projects, people who are part of the market research agency as well as your seniors, right? So your CXOs, the head of research and insights. So what would you say that they need to do in order to develop these skills, in order to set this up for the freshers who are joining?
yeah, yeah. So I think it's the responsibility of the seniors. I mean, or the
Yeah.
organization. I mean, the CXOs or whoever it is, the organization, to make sure the juniors are better equipped because they come in with very basic exposure to marketing. They've done MBAs maybe as a part of under marketing. They've done maybe a bit of
Just
market
one
research.
module
Otherwise,
or one, yeah.
yeah, and otherwise most of them have very little. I mean, they know how to look at data. I mean, probably in that selection test, you would have shown them a few graphs and said, okay, can you interpret that? And that's about it. So they with school level stats. They're basically exposed to that and they're good at that. And they're intelligent youngsters, which is very good. But market research is far, there is so much more to it. There is so much when you practically, and when you're practically, executing a study, remember there's someone paying for that.
Yeah.
And some large decisions could be done based on that for this thing. So when you get into it, one is the thinking process. Yeah, you need to expose them to the thinking process. Basically, okay, what is the objective? And for that objective, what is the kind of information you need? And for that info, to take the decision to address the objective. For that information, what kind of questions you need to be asking?
Yeah.
How best to ask those questions? What is the approach that you need to use? And if you are going to ask these kinds of questions, should it be done? What way should it be done? Quantitatively, qualitatively? If it is even that, then what is the next step? So, how do you actually design your questionnaire? And while you're designing your questionnaire, you need to have the back of your mind. This is the kind of analysis I'm going to do. And then, that's how that whole process, and that works out into an actual proposal, into a
Yeah.
research proposal, which is again put forward. So you've thought through the entire thing as much as well as you can. Now that it's fine to say, I mean, you can put these steps in bullet points and say this, and this, and this, followed by this followed by this, and so on. Now that has to become, what do you call this, muscle memory sort of a thing, in the sense, they have to actually be doing that.
Correct.
So a good way to do it, I think, is about a month's training for anyone
Okay.
who joins especially on the research side, because on the client side, invariably they are, have had some research experience and then they go into the research
Go into the
department,
content.
or they
Yeah.
are moving as part of the internal movement. They go around and partly do research and then they move on to brand management and so on. But
Yeah.
anyway, let's look at the research side of it. I mean, the agency side of it. So insist on at least a 1 month training program, and it does. And there are many training programs. But the focus on that is not really to teach them the in depths of the statistics of how you do regression analysis and what the p value is and this and that.
Yeah.
It is broadly to tell them about this entire process
Mm.
of this thinking process of how you go about it. And then when you implement it, what are the kind of things you need to be wary about? If it's a questionnaire design or it's a discussion guide design, if you're doing qualitative, what are the various kinds of approaches that can be done? If it's
Mm.
quantitative, what are the various kinds of things that can be used? And the
Mm-hmm.
implications of each. There's trade off for everything and the kind of analysis that you will do. Or the best way to do it is rather than just saying, okay, questionnaire design, these are the don'ts, and you list out 20 of them and say, don't do this, don't do this. No one will. So the
Yeah.
best way is actually take case studies and
Yeah.
and have that case study cover maybe even 6 case studies, but do it thoroughly. That
Yeah.
case study should be start with a business objective and say, okay,
Mm.
someone says my sales is dropping, or
Mm.
retail audit data tells me my market share is dropping.
Mm.
I don't know what to. So
Mm.
then from there you start with that. I mean, that is an issue.
Mm.
So, I mean, that could span across so many things. It need not just be the customer side. It could be a product. It could be, distribution. So many pricing, so many things, and new entrants, so many things. But let that thought thinking come through. It is really training them on thinking, and it's rational thinking. That's it. It's nothing more than that.
Mm.
So let that thinking come through, and then from that thinking, say, okay, now, okay, obviously, we are not going to advise them on how to change your production, this thing to make better chocolate. That's not
Mm.
the thing. What
Mm.
we're saying is, from a market research perspective,
Mhm.
let's help you identify what could be the issues. And once you identify that, then you can probably take, further decisions. We'll give you certain. So that flow through can be done in a classroom because
Yep.
you don't have to do a live this. And at the same time, at the end of it, once they've kind of everyone's agreed and this and that, and they've gone through this, you could have a set of and they've developed their questionnaires. Let's say it's a quant thing. Then you can say, okay, now fine, all that, and you critique that. Then you say, okay, now this is the questionnaire that was used.
Yeah.
Okay, as the sample questionnaire for that particular issue. This is the thing that
Mhm.
was used, and this is
Mm.
the sample data that we got,
Mm.
and these are the outputs that we got.
Mm.
So then, in that case, then let them actually look at and how you analyze that information, or
Mm.
from this questionnaire, what kind of analysis do you think you can do, and then run
Mm.
that analysis, and then actually get into not a detailed report, but let's say a 1 page or bullet point. These are the key takeouts. They
Mm.
go through that process. They've done their thinking. They've
Mm.
done their designing. They've done their questionnaire preparation. They've done their analysis plan. They've done the actual analysis with just one project. And they do
Yeah.
this across at least 6 projects, and you can do it in a month.
Yeah. Mm.
I think
Mm.
that would set them up, and agencies benefit from it hugely.
So if let's say I join, right, and then you can't do it immediately. Obviously, they work for a while. Let's say after a year of running these different projects, they do this training program. I'm assuming after that they get back into their little bubble. There needs to be refreshers, right? There needs to be training in place. Is that how you'd see it and set it up?
Yeah. So it's like, for instance, I had to run some, I was working with some people, and I had to, after a long time, I had to do some correspondence analysis. Correspondence analysis. Now,
Mm.
that I have done it many years back, but that doesn't matter. Now I know it. In the back of my mind, I know that's a tool I can
No.
use for the
Mm.
client. Okay, so that is
Mm.
there. But how to actually go about and how to read the maps and all that, that's, it's all there on the net. So
True.
when you need to do it, you can always refer to it. You can have refresher courses, but far more important is to develop these basic skills.
Mm.
And as you go, you will keep improving. I mean, with more exposure, with more, variety of projects and things like that, you'll keep improving. And, that's experience.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that, the emphasis has to be on those basics. And I
Yeah.
won't even say let them work for a year and then train them. What
Yeah.
are they doing in that year?
Mm.
you know
Mm.
and this training doesn't have to be the entire day.
Yeah.
They need to put in that extra 2 hours or 4 hours a week extra,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of a thing, to over and
Mm.
above whatever they have to do in the office. So that
Nice.
that helps, that helps them. And the best is the agency, because they get the respect from the client.
Yeah.
If a person with 2 years or 3 years experience can talk to a marketing manager and say, maybe you should look at it this way, that's phenomenal. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal for this thing. And that can come through only if you have this, the confidence of, I know these things. Back of my mind, I know basically I can do conjoint, I can do cluster analysis, I can do factor analysis, all that. But if I actually need to do it, I will again go back to the net, read up, because I've done it so many years back, and just to read up and refresh. But I know this is arsenal that I have
Yeah.
when I'm talking to a client about how to address a particular thing.
Yeah.
Same way in qualitative research, and same way in the way, whether you want to do face to face or online interviews or whatever.
Mm.
As long as you're aware of all these things and you
Mm.
know how to use it when it has to be used, then these refresher things can happen as and when you're actually doing it.
Yeah, so it reminds me of this. There's this agency in India, and unfortunately, it's not practiced across all agencies, right? So if once you move from one level, so you have executive one, two, three, and then you go to senior research man, things like that. So moving from one level to another, most cases, oh, you've been in for 2 years, you're eligible for a promotion, right? And then 2 years, that's the trend in most places. For this agency, you have to pass a test. So your tests are exactly like this. They're given case studies. They have to put together, this is the problem. They have to put, and at every level, obviously, the skills required are going to be different. So it's going to be, to reach that senior manager, analyzing, okay, this is the problem and what are the different aspects that you need to go through. I thought that was a phenomenal thing to implement. One is, testing their knowledge before you actually, promote them. But in order for them to pass that and do well in that and have the skills, the training that you mentioned is required, and
It's
good for
required.
that.
And different skills. As you go senior, you need to grow, different skills. Business development is a completely different skill.
Yeah.
Managing your team is a completely different skill.
Yeah.
So those are additional skills you come up, but your basics. I mean, we are in the market research industry. I mean, if you don't get the basics right, and after some time,
Yeah.
you can't even ask, certain basic questions. When you're in 1 to 3 years, you can, you're free to ask, but 15 years into the industry, and then you say, no, 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 I don't know how this sampling, I don't know what you mean by
Mm.
weighting. And that becomes a big issue, especially if you do it in front of the client or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let those basics be taught, and that then, as you're going senior, and this thing, the example you gave is really good.
Yeah.
Level one, you, along with various other evaluation, you also do a test and make sure
Yeah.
you pass on that.
Yeah.
Level two with certain other things, and if it is well thought through and there is a system there, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant
Yeah. Yeah.
for
So
this. It's just that this emphasis has to come in that training. We need to train our people,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
it need not be. It's not such a heavy cost, really. I don't think it's such a heavy cost to the agency.
No, yeah, and to the agency, not at all. To the actual people who are going through the training, like you said, it's 4 hours, 5 hours a week, right? So it's not
Correct.
too much to
Correct.
ask. But you shouldn't get, in this rut of, oh, this report needs to go out. Everybody has, deadlines and reports that they need to
Yeah.
work on. So it has to be a top-down approach where the senior people within the agency understand the importance of this, right? Understand the importance of
Hmm.
developing that skill amongst all of
True.
the teams that are working on it. This has been great. Any final
Great.
thoughts, Abu?
No, I just hope this goes down because the industry needs it. And
Yes.
except for a few agencies, there is not enough emphasis in the industry. And I'm talking about it. The clients also don't insist on it, and
Yeah.
the agencies also kind of put it aside and saying they don't consider it as an essential thing to be
Mm-hmm.
done. So that needs to change, and it's not something new. To be frank, I've been seeing this for over many years. I've seen it, of course, in the Middle East. They don't expect to train people, but definitely in the Middle East and even in India.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this needs to change. It definitely needs to change. I mean, it's gradually, because everyone benefits from it. The inefficiencies go out. Uh, Much better quality of information and analysis. Clients benefit from it. Costs come down. There is so much, benefits from this entire thing. So just keep that in mind, and I hope the seniors who are there actually
Yeah.
think about it and get these
Yeah.
things done.
So for everyone, I hope that's given you enough, food for thought. If you do have any further questions, like I mentioned earlier, that you'd like Abati to help you with, set up these programs, right? Why not? And or just from a standard consulting market research point of view, he's been tagged in the post, so you can reach out to him directly or reach out to us at Question Pro, and we can loop him in there and to help you with that. So with that, thank you all for joining. It's been a fabulous session. I would really thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. So much that we can learn from, so much that we can implement. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and I will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. A pleasure. Enjoy the conversation.